as we really close out this three-part series, we'll be talking about the policy and the regulation side of things. So really excited about the experts that we have on here today.
So, despite there being a lot of obscurity, there is still a lot of work that can be done now to minimize the footprint. And there's also a lot of policy work that's being done to address the lack of transparency that I know we'll be digging into throughout this panel. By looking at the entire life cycle, we're able to identify parts of that life cycle where we can optimize without compromising quality.
There was quite rapid growth in terms of activity, in terms of UK advertisers who were actively experimenting or even had live use case studies that leapt by 20% in that time. But in terms of members that had an AI policy, that only grew by about 7% in the same time. So what we can extrapolate from that is that there's potentially a bit of a lag between AI activity, adoption, exploration, and AI policy forming.
You already have had several states in the country introduce legislation this session about making sure that AI, particularly data centers to power AI, aren't disproportionately using water, electricity, et cetera. I would say what you're seeing from this administration is a strong sense to want to make sure that nothing about that gets in the way of what they consider to be an expansion of AI.
Advertisers, it's not that they're not concerned about environmental factors. They may well have pretty robust ESG policies and plans, activity plans in place. They're just not connecting the dots between their ESG policies and their emerging AI policies and AI activities. There's definitely a disconnect there that all of us collectively need to try and work on filling in the gaps.
When the original AI white paper went out for consultation, there's a lot of people then responded and saying, well, what's the government doing about sustainability? Now, in the government's response to that consultation, it did recognize actually, yes, sustainability is an important thing, but they kind of felt that this was then wrapped up in a broader kind of like values and sustainability piece there. So again, not a lot of detail from governments either. And this is kind of made very complex. And Alison kind of mentioned this as like kind of geopolitical competition as well, which is another thing which is then kind of driving to, the politics and the policy at the moment. I guess a lot of government officials would also argue that there's already existing sustainability legislation would still apply anyway. It's just not specifically on, within this kind of AI legislation framework or white paper policy papers.
But the reality of the matter is that everyone understands that making AI models more efficient isn't just about lowering the carbon emissions. It's also about reducing the cost, which everyone understands. It's also about, managing really clear resource restraints. So I've been in counties and cities and states where the government officials could care less about the term sustainability, but you know what they do care about? Making it cheaper, making it more accessible to folks in their district, having a competitive advantage despite resource constraints. And that's just the reality of the matter is that everyone is actually incentivized to come up with more efficient technologies. It's really just a question of whether or not we're going to create the political and policy frameworks to continue incentivizing that kind of growth, or whether we're just going to start pouring billions and trillions of dollars into wasteful, incredibly large models that may not actually be going anywhere and will become obsolete in a matter of a year or two. So I think that is one thing that gives me some level of hope, is that there is an alignment there around cost, sustainability, and accessibility that just needs to be harnessed.